Rahim. Assalamu alaikum viewers. This lecture is about the first determinant of national income, that is consumption. So here first of all we will define the term consumption, and then after explaining the consumption function we would derive the propensity to consume with the help of table and diagram. And then we will explain the properties or the attributes of consumption function, and in the last of this lecture we will explain the types of consumption. So let's start our lecture. As far as the definition of consumption is concerned, we can define it as it is the amount of money which is devoted to purchase a consumer goods at a given level of income, or we can say that it is the part of income which is spent on goods and services. In order to derive the equation for consumption, we would go back towards the equation for disposable personal income. As we know that disposable personal income is the income that is available for spending, and a household or a person can divide it into consumption and saving. As we can see here in the form of equation, that disposable personal income is the combination of both consumption and saving. So if we solve this equation for consumption, then here from we can derive the equation for consumption as consumption is equals to disposable personal income less saving. By using this equation, we can define the term consumption as it is the part of income not saved. So after defining here the consumption, now we will move forward and explain that which factors can affect the consumption, meaning that we are talking about consumption function. As consumption is dependent on the level of disposable personal income, or it varies with the level of disposable personal income, so we can write it as consumption is the function of income. But here a question arises, what type of relationship exists between consumption and income? So we can explain it as when disposable personal income increases, consumption increases. When disposable personal income decreases, consumption decreases, meaning that positive or direct relationship exists between consumption and disposable personal income. Or we can also say that consumption is an increasing function of income. So after defining the consumption function, now we will derive the consumption function with the help of table and diagram. The graphical representation of consumption function is accorded as propensity to consume. So propensity to consume is the graphical representation of consumption and income relationship. It is a curve or a graph shows that which level of consumption is attached with what level of income. In order to derive the propensity to consume, we have assumed different values, or we have taken different values for income and consumption, and by locating these values in the graphical area, we obtain the propensity to consume, that is positively sloped curve with the positive intercept. So 2 points or 2 things that we should note here, that propensity to consume or the consumption function has a positive intercept, meaning that when disposable personal income is zero, or when a person has nothing to spend, then consumption is not zero and consumption is always positive. Meaning that here the individual or the persons are making these savings. When disposable personal income increases, consumption increases, but the change in consumption is less than change in income. Here we will explain the attributes or the properties of consumption function. There are 2 properties or the attributes of consumption function, that is average propensity to consume and marginal propensity to consume. So what does the word average and marginal propensity to consume means? So we can define the term average propensity to consume as it is a percentage of consumption expenditure to income at different level of income. The interpretation for the average propensity to consume is that which percentage of income is devoted to consumption, and we can derive it as mathematically average propensity to consume is equals to consumption over disposable personal income, meaning that how much disposable income is devoted for consumption. Next attribute or the property of the consumption function is the marginal propensity to consume, which we can derive from the ratio of change in consumption to the change in disposable personal income. And the interpretation for the marginal propensity to consume is that how much change in disposable personal income brings how much change in consumption, and mathematically we can derive it as MPC or the marginal propensity to consume is equals to ratio of change in consumption to change in disposable personal income. Now we will derive these concept or these properties with the help of table. In order to derive the properties of consumption function, we have utilized the same values that we have utilized to derive the propensity to consume. So in order to derive the APC, we use the formula consumption over income. So by dividing the entries in the consumption column by the entries in the income column, we have calculated the values for the average propensity to consume. And how we can interpret these results? As we can see here that the first two entries in the APC column is representing that 1.66 and 1.16. These entries representing that person has spending more than that of his income, meaning that he is making these savings here. The next entry is 1 here, 1 representing that 100% income is devoted to consumption. What does the word 0.92 represent? Here 0.92 represents that 92% of the income is devoted to consumption. And if we see on the last entry against APC is equal to 0.77. What does it means? It means that 77% of 77% of income is devoted to consumption. In the same way, we have derived the marginal propensity to consume, as marginal propensity to consume is the ratio of change in consumption to change in income. So by solving this, we have derived the values against all entries, that is 0.67. As we have taken the same changes in the income and consumption, so we get the same values against all the entries of income and consumption, that is 0.67. How we can interpret these results? We can say that 100% change in income brings 67% change in consumption. In the last of lecture, we will explain the types of consumption, as the total consumption function is the combination of C bar plus CY, where C bar representing the autonomous consumption and CY representing the induced consumption. Now we will explain them one by one. C bar here is the interpretation of autonomous consumption. What does the word autonomous consumption means? Autonomous consumption is the type of consumption that is independent of the level of disposable personal income, or that does not varies with the level of income. So we can say that here consumption is not a function of income. Whether the disposable personal income is zero, increases or decreases, consumption would remain same or constant. That type of consumption is autonomous consumption, as we can derive it as in the diagram. We can see that consumption C bar line is parallel to the horizontal axis, meaning that C bar, that is the autonomous consumption, remains constant for all the level of disposable personal income, whether the income is zero, increases or decreases. This type of consumption remains constant. So next we will move towards the induced consumption. Induced consumption is the type of consumption that is dependent on the level of disposable personal income, or that varies with the level of disposable personal income. So we can write it as consumption here is the function of income. Here when income is zero, consumption is zero. When income increases, consumption increases. When income decreases, consumption decreases. That type of consumption is induced consumption, and we have derived this induced consumption in this diagram. As we can see here that the intercept for the induced consumption is zero, meaning that when income is zero, induced consumption is also zero. When income increases, induced consumption increases because it has a positive slope curve.